Hello, crypto world. Welcome to the Chart Historian. My name is Justin, and on this channel, I delve deep into crypto charts, exploring chart structures, fractals, and patterns. So I have the XRP chart open today, and since my last video on XRP, you can see that XRP has moved up about 30 some odd percent, 32 point something percent. Now, I was warning of this or sounding the alarm that XRP was ready to move up. It had completed the first part of the sideways range-bound time that I have spoken in depth about. So there are three fractals in this sideways range-bound time. We have completed the first one, and with this move up, folks, we are now starting on the second fractal. So this move up right here is the beginning of that second fractal. So what can we expect from this fractal? What does this fractal look like? What does history have to tell us about this structure that we are now moving into? Well, in this video, my goal is to deep dive into this structure, into this second fractal of the sideways range-bound time that precedes the next bull run. So let's do that. And the best place to start is at the beginning. And the reason why I say that is because XRP starts with this sideways range-bound time. So let's go to the very beginning of the chart. Okay, folks, so here we are at the very beginning of the XRP chart, and this is fractal 1. Before this is literally the beginning of the chart, which starts in 2013. So price moves up. This, I believe, is a fragment of what would be a decline. So price moves up, and this is the beginning of that sideways range-bound time. Here is the first fractal, here's the second fractal, here is the third fractal. So in part 1, it moves up. There's two parts. There's part A and B. Part A is where it moves up. Part B is where it goes kind of flat or sideways. Sometimes it kind of goes a bit downward like that. So now we are in part 2. So part 2 moves up again. Now, in this instance, it moved very high compared to fractal 1, and that is not very normal for this repetitive structure to do, but it always is a potential possibility. It could happen again. So let's examine this structure in structure 2. So there's part A. I broke them down into three parts, these different parts. So part A is the initial move up, and if you notice that there are two parts to this part A. Now, this is not always going to be just like this. So when a fractal plays out, it's always going to be original in the sense that the timing, the height, and the depth, they're always going to be unique. So after this initial move up, it moves back down, and it does a bounce right here, this wave. So this wave right here is part B, and then the final one is part C, where it does another bounce or wave before moving up into the final fractal, fractal 3 of the sideways range-bound time. So this is the first instance of this structure. Let's move on to the next time this structure plays out and see if we can find this similarity, this DNA kind of showing up in fractal 2 the next time it plays out. So this took place this one right here was in 2013. As we move along, we'll see where the next one is. Okay, so here is the next time this sideways range-bound time plays out, and it is after the decline or the bear market. So remember that tiny little fragment that took place right here at the very beginning? Well, that is most likely something that would be akin to this right here. So again, fractal 1, fractal 2, and fractal 3 that make up the sideways range-bound time, price moves up in part A of fractal 1, and then part B, it kind of goes flat and sideways. So here we are in fractal 2. Now let's deep dive into this a bit and examine the structure of it and see if we can find that DNA reappearing in this structure once again. So we have part A where it moves back up. Now there's two parts to this structure right here. This happens in a very short time frame. Here's the second one, it moves back down. Part B in this one, it's just 1 day candle up and 1 day candle down. And then part C, you see that final wave or bounce on this structure, part 2. How about we zoom further into this and go into an hour candle and look at this on a closer scale. Okay, so this is over on CoinTrader Pro. It's a free website. You can look up different charts, and it allows me to go into a very small time frame. So I'm on an hour candle, and this took place in 2014. So as you can see, that same structure that was on the day candle was very quick. Here is part A. You can see the two different parts to it. It moves down. Part B is just really short, move up, move down. Now, I count this as all of part B. And then here is part C. Part C kind of goes up and does this kind of cresting wave type structure over here. And there's something here to observe how there's two parts to this structure. You might see that playing out again. So let's move back to the day candle chart and take it from there. Okay, so here we are back at the day candle, and this is that same structure, structure 2 of the 3-part structure that makes up the sideways range-bound time. So this was in 2014. We're going to move on to the next range-bound sideways time and examine the second fractal of that time. Okay, so here is the next sideways range-bound time. This starts in 2015, and it goes all the way to 2017. So this sideways range-bound time comes after the bear market right here and before the next bull run, which is over here. So let's examine this structure real quick. It has 3 parts, 1, 2, 3, and once again, here's part A of 1, and then B kind of goes, instead of flat, this one kind of drops down to a point before moving back up in fractal 2. So here is part A in fractal 2. And if we examine this one, it doesn't really have a very distinct 2 parts to it, but there is, I almost think that, I would say that this part right here, if you zoom in, here's the first part and here's the second part. So it does, this peak consists of 2 parts to it. Let's zoom in so you can see that better. So here is the first part, and then here is the second part, after which it declines. Let's zoom out a little. So there are 3 different parts to this. Part A right here, part B, and then part C. So in part B, we have a divide, a split, just like we had over here on CoinTrader Pro. This is the zoomed in chart. In 2014, you have that first part of the wave and the second part of the wave. So at the end of part B, we have part C, where it moves back up and kind of declines before moving back up into part A of the third fractal. So once again, we have the 3 parts to this fractal, 1, 2, and 3. Let's continue to move on and see what the next one looks like. Okay, so this is in 2017, and it takes place after this decline right here. So it comes to a peak, and here's the bear market. Now, this all took place rather rapidly. Here is part 1 of the range-bound sideways time, part 2 and part 3, before all this happens, before the next bull run takes place. And as you can see, part A of the first fractal, part B kind of comes down, not so flat as some of the other ones were. Here is part A of the second fractal, and as you can see, it consists of 2 parts, 1 little peak here and then another peak here. It declines. Now this one is kind of interesting, I think. So part B doesn't really get much airtime. It just kind of goes flat, but it drops, goes up a little, kind of travels flat, and then drops again. So you don't have much height here, but you do have the depth over here defining that wave. So remember, when a fractal repeats, the timing, the height, and the depth are all going to be original every single time the pattern plays out. So as we can see here, the height wasn't as high as it normally goes, but we do have the depth. So part C of this structure, it moves up and does that little cresting wave pattern that we saw in some of the other ones before moving back up into fractal 3, which is the final fractal before the next bull run. So let's move along and examine the next one that takes place. Okay, so Here was the one we just examined. We had this massive bull run, which is currently the current high. And then we went into a bear market. And then we have the sideways range-bound time here with the three fractals, fractal 1, fractal 2, fractal 3. Here we have part A in fractal 1, and then it moves down into part B of fractal 1, which is kind of flat in this instance. It moves back up in fractal 2 with part A. Let's zoom in on this. And the reason why I'm going through history is so you can see the repetitive theme that is at play here, so you get an understanding of what we should expect with this current structure that is going to be playing out now. So price moves up. Here we have one peak. It kind of comes back down and makes another peak. This one was higher than this one. It comes back down. So here you have part B of the structure and part C. Part C is much more consistent. It moves up and does this kind of wave type thing where it comes to a crest and then just kind of falls down before moving into fractal 3, at which point at the end of it, it goes into its bull run. This bull run was not as high as the previous. Okay, so this brings us to where we are today. So here was the bull run that took place in 2021, the decline that took place, and it moved back into its sideways range-bound phase that it goes into before the next bull run. So we have completed fractal 1, and we are currently just entering into fractal 2. So fractal 1 had the two parts, part A, where it moved up, part B, and this one it kind of went flat. Now we are currently just entering fractal 2, and let's zoom in on this so we can get a better idea of what it's doing today. But just remember, historically speaking, we know that there are three basic parts to fractal 2. There's part A, which we are currently working on, then we will go to part B, and then we'll conclude this fractal with part C. So let's zoom in on a smaller candle and examine what is taking place, and let's compare it to one that has already taken place, and we'll see how the structure aligns. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here. So this here is part A. Let's zoom in. So price is now currently moving up, and it has moved up roughly about 30 some odd percent, like I pointed out in the beginning. Now, is this the final peak? Well, historically speaking, we see a trend of two potential peaks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this fractal 2 from 2019. So this is after the current all-time high went into its decline, went into fractal 1. This is the fractal that I have been using in the past for fractal 1, a fractal 1 comparison. And today's fractal 1 is very similar. Of course, every single time it plays out, it's going to do it in its own unique way. And that's because timing, height, and depth are always going to be original. So now we are in fractal 2. So I am going to copy and paste this structure over onto today's chart. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so here is that structure, copy and pasted. I shrunk it down to the current size of and timing of today's structure. So it's not going to be exact, but as you can see, it is following the basic idea of what it did in 2019. So what I would like to propose to you to expect in the coming days is a structure that consists of three parts. Part A, where it moves up just like it has been doing, and it may continue to follow a basic idea of this. Now it's going to do it in its own unique, original way. So this structure will have part A and then part B right here, and then part C. Now, how this plays out, I don't know. How deep will it go? I don't know. How high will it go? I don't know. And how long will it take to play out? I don't know. But what I do know from history is that this structure has those three basic parts, the A, the B, and the C. So folks, historically speaking, from this sideways range-bound time, according to my thesis, is we are going to see something like I went into in depth play out here once again. Now, I know there's a lot of talk out there of bull runs just around the corner, of the lawsuit coming to an end. I'm here to tell you that historically speaking, from a chart perspective, from a fractal analysis, chart structure analysis, some version of this is going to play out here once again. We have to make it through fractal 2, then we'll go into fractal 3, and at that point, that's when we should expect the bull run. If you find this type of technical analysis where I deep dive into fractals and the chart structure interesting, you should consider hitting that subscribe button because I will continue to follow this structure as it plays out. I know this technical analysis is not very common. My type of technical analysis is all about chart structure and fractals. I would say it's a subject in the greater technical analysis field that is not studied like it should be. I'm not a financial advisor, so none of this information should be used as financial or investment advice. I'm so glad you caught this video. I hope you catch my next one. Have a great day, and bye for now.